Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Guardian by Nicholas Sparks. I haven't touched this book in a while. I read up to chapter 6. I'm super good at reading. Maybe I can try and do a quick recap from what I remember. What's the main character? I'd already forgot what her name is. She went on a date with one of the dudes. And she likes him. She went on a date with a rich guy. And she likes him, but there's, her oh my god, late husband, her late husband's, best friend also likes her. And, well, he doesn't do anything about it because I guess it's gonna be awkward. And then he saw her and the rich guy, Richard, great name, and he's all like, great. I think my favorite part out of that entire thing was what one of the other characters said. Let me see if I can find it. From chapter 4, page 45. I'm not gonna count what paragraph it is because it's way too much. Did he just kiss her? Mike asked, his mouth hanging open. Earlier he had been standing near the open bay of the garage when he had seen Richard walking up the street. He'd watched Richard walk in alone. He'd watched Julie and Richard walk out together, and Henry had walked up just as Richard was leaning in to kiss Julie. That's what it looked like to me, Henry answered. They don't even know each other, and they do now. Thanks, Henry. You're making me feel a whole lot better. Do you want me to lie to you instead? Right now, I think I would, Mike mumbled. All right, Henry said, thinking about it. That fella sure is ugly. At Henry's comment, Mike put his hands in his head. His head in his hands. His hands in his head. I'm sorry. What a good friend. Chapter 6 is kind of long. I'm kind of hoping I can get through this at least semi-fast. But knowing me, it's probably not going to happen. The Sailing Clipper was a bar typical of small coastal towns, dimly lit and smelling of mildew, cigarettes, and stale booze. It was popular with blue-collared workers who crowded around the bar ordering Budweiser in volume. Along the far wall, the stage overlooked a slightly warped dance floor that seldom emptied when bands were playing. A few dozen tables, carved with the initials of most everyone who'd walked through the door, were arranged haphazardly on matching chairs circling them. The group on stage, Ocracoke Inlet, was something of a regular at the Clipper. The owner, a one-legged man people called Leaning Joe, liked the group because it played songs that put people in a good mood, which made them want to stay, which in turn was good for business as they ordered booze in quantity. Well, I mean, I certainly hope so. Because if you're going to have a band who could not play songs that got anyone into a dancing mood, then you probably want to get somebody else. They played nothing original, nothing daring, nothing that couldn't be found in jukeboxes around the country, which is exactly the reason why Mike thought everyone liked them so much. Really liked them. I don't know about that. That sounds kind of boring, honestly. When they played, people came in droves, which wasn't the case with the bands he played with. Never once, however, had they asked Mike to fill in, even though he was on a first-name basis with most of the group. Second-rate band or not, the thought was depressing. I don't think that was in the first chapter. Mike I think he really wants to become a musician, and he plays with, these younger kids, I think. But, I think he sucks. I don't think they explicitly tell you that he sucks, but, he's not great, and no one really cares about what he does. But then the whole evening had been depressing. Hell, the whole week had been depressing for that matter. Ever since Monday, when Julie came by to pick up her keys and casually mentioned that she'd be going out with Richard on Saturday instead of spending tonight with them, Mike had been in a funk. He'd been mumbling to himself about the unfairness of it all with such regularity that a couple of customers had even commented on it to Henry. Worse, Mike couldn't summon the courage to talk to Julie the rest of the week knowing that if he did, she'd press him on what seemed to be bothering him. He wasn't ready to tell her the truth, but seeing her walk by the shop every day reminded him that he had no idea what to do about the whole situation. Sure, Henry and Emma were great, and he liked spending time with them, but let's be honest here. On a night like this, Mike knew he was a third wheel in this little group. They had each other to go home to. Mike, on the other hand, had Zip, unless he counted the occasional mouse that scurried through his kitchen. They had each other to dance with. Mike had to sit on the table alone half the time, reading beer labels as he peeled them off the bottles. And when Emma did ask him to dance, which she'd done regularly tonight, Mike would head to the floor, his head hung low, hoping to God that no one would see him dancing with his sister. Sister-in-law, whatever. Technicalities weren't important at a time like this. When she asked, it still made him feel as if his mother had offered to go with him to the prom because he couldn't get a date. Jesus, Mike! He needs to, kick himself out of that funk, considering he hasn't even said anything to the main character that I still don't remember her name. And I don't remember if they said it. Immediately, I don't remember anything. This was not the way things were supposed to be tonight. Julie was supposed to be here. Julie was supposed to be the fourth wheel. Julie was supposed to be the one dancing with him, smiling over a drink, laughing and flirting. And she would have been if it wasn't for Richard. Richard. He hated that guy. Didn't know him, didn't want to know him, didn't matter. Simply thinking the name caused him to scowl, and he'd been scowling a lot, all evening long. Watching his brother carefully, Henry finished the last of his cores and set the bottle off to the side. I think maybe you ought to cut back on that cheap beer you're drinking, Henry commented. Looks like it's giving you gas. Mike looked up. Henry was smirking as he reached for Emma's bottle of beer. She'd gone off to the bathroom, and considering the ever-present lines in a crowd this size, Henry knew she might be a while. He'd already ordered another to replace it. I'm drinking the same stuff you are. True, Henry said. But you have to realize that some men can handle it better than others. Yeah, keep talking. But aren't we in a mood this evening? Henry said. You've been riding me all night. Oh, aren't we in a mood this evening? You've been riding me all night. Considering the way you've been acting lately, you deserve it. We had a great dinner, I've been engaging you with my sparkling wit all night long, and Emma's been making sure that you're not always sitting alone at the table like some loser whose date just stood him up. Yeah, he's having some good fun with his friends, and he's being kind of a downer. Should have stayed home if he was going to be like that. That's not funny. It's not meant to be. I'm simply speaking the truth. Think of me as your very own burning bush. When in doubt, when you need answers, you come to me. For instance, you need to lighten up about this. You're letting it ruin the whole night. Look, I'm doing my best, okay? Oh, Henry said, cocking an eyebrow. I see. Sorry. I guess I'm just imagining all the deep sighs. Mike pulled the rest of the label off his bottle and crumpled it into a ball. I'm actually kind of irritated about that. I don't like the peeling of the label. Yeah, you're a funny guy, Henry. You should head to Vegas with your act. Believe me, I'd be the first to pack your bags. Henry leaned back in his seat. Oh, come on. I'm just having a little fun. Yeah, at my expense. Henry held up his hands, looking innocent. You're the only one here. Who else can I pick on? Mike glared at him before turning away. All right. I'm sorry already, Henry said. But listen, I'll say it again. Just because she's out with Richard doesn't mean you've lost your chance forever. Instead of moping around, use it as a challenge. Maybe this should inspire you to ask her out. I was planning on that. You were? Like he has every other time. He's been planning on always trying to ask her, and then he's all like, nope, never mind, and he backpedaled out of there. You were? Yeah, after we talked on Monday, I decided to do exactly what you said. Tonight was supposed to be the night. Henry studied him. Good, he finally said. I'm proud of you. Mike waited for more, but Henry stayed silent. What, no jokes this time? No reason to make jokes. Because you don't believe me? No, I believe you. I have to, I guess. Why? Because I'll get to see you do it. Huh? The gods are with you, little brother. What the hell are you talking about? Henry raised his chin, nodding in the direction of the door. Guess you just walked in. Richard stood beside Julie just inside the door as she craned her neck, looking for a place to sit. I didn't realize it would be so crowded, Richard shouted over the noise. Are you sure you want to stay? Come on, it'll be fun, you'll see. Though he flashed a quick smile of agreement, Richard was doubtful. This place struck him as a refugee for those who drank to escape their problems. Excuse you. Isn't every bar anywhere you drink? People who were desperate, not depressed, for the companionship of a stranger. It was, he thought, the kind of atmosphere that promoted the notion that everyone here, whether with someone or not, was up for grabs. Julie didn't belong in a place like this, any more than he did. Well, I don't know about that. I can understand the companionship thing and being all like, hey, what up? Let's talk about something so I don't have to think about the fact that my wife is cheating on me. Woo! On stage, the band had started up again, and people were trading places on the floor, some heading in, others taking a break. He leaned in close to Julie's ear, and she could feel his breath against her. Let's get something to drink, he said, before we find a place to sit down. Julie nodded. Sure. You lead the way, the bar's straight ahead. As Richard began squeezing between people, he reached back, offering his hand to Julie. Without hesitation, she took it. When they reached the bar, he held on to it as he raised his other hand to get the bartender's attention. So that's him, huh? Emma said. Emma, 38, was a green-eyed blonde with a sunny disposition, which more than offset the fact that she wasn't all that pretty in the classic sense. Short and round-faced, she dieted constantly with no success, though neither Mike nor Henry knew why she bothered. People responded to Emma not for superficial reasons, but who she was and the things she did. She volunteered regularly at her children's school, and at 3 o'clock every afternoon she propped open the front door with a brick so that the kids in the neighborhood would have a place to congregate. And they did. Her house was a beehive of activity for hours as children trampled in and out, drawn by the homemade pizzas she cooked almost daily. But if the children loved her, Henry adored her, and considered himself fortunate to have her by his side. Emma was good for Henry, and vice versa, as they often told each other they were too busy laughing together to have any time to argue. Like Henry, Emma loved to tease, and when they got going, they seemed to feed off each other. And after a couple drinks, watch out, Mike thought. They were deadly, like sharks who fed on their young. Unfortunately for Mike, he knew that right now he was nothing but a baby shark swimming ahead of Mommy's open jaws. One look at the hungry gleam in their eyes made him want to dive for cover. Henry nodded. That's him. Emma continued to stare. He's really something, isn't he? I think Mabel used the word sexy, Henry offered. Emma raised a finger as if Henry was an attorney who'd made a valid point in court. Yes, sexy. Very sexy. In a handsome stranger kind of way, I mean. Mike crossed his arms and sank lower in his seat, wondering if the evening could get any worse. He's just like, how am I supposed to compare to that? I'm not sexy. I'm just Mike. Super jealous and upset. My sentiments exactly, Henry said, still waiting for drinks. Oh, still waiting? I can... Richard and Julie were standing at the bar, their faces in profile. They do make a lovely couple, he added. They certainly stand out in a crowd, Emma agreed. It's like one of those People magazine articles about the world's most glamorous couples. Like they should be starring in a movie together. Knock it off, you guys, Mike finally cut in. I get it. He's perfect. He's wonderful. He's Mr. Everything. Henry and Emma faced Mike, their eyes bright with amusement. We're not saying that, Mike, Henry offered. We're just saying he looks like he is. For all we know, he could be crazy. Emma reached across the table and patted Mike on the shoulder. Besides, she said, there's no reason to lose hope. Looks aren't the only thing that matter. Looks aren't the only thing that matters, she said as a robot. Mike glared at them. Henry leaned toward Emma. I guess you should know my little brother's been having a hard time with all this, and from his expression I don't think we're helping. Oh, really? Emma asked innocently. I'd be fine if you two would quit picking on me. You've been at it all night. Honestly, I feel for him. I don't think I could handle my own brother and his wife mocking me the entire damn time. But you're such an easy target when you're this way, Emma giggled. Pouting does that, you know. Henry and I have already been through this, and it's not attractive at all, Emma said, ignoring his comment. Take it from a woman who knows. Unless you want to lose out to a guy like that, you'd better change your tune before it's too late. If you keep acting the way you've been acting all night, you might as well say goodbye right now. Mike blinked at the honesty. So I should act like I don't care? No, Mike. Act like you do care, like you want what's best for her. How do I do that? Be her friend. I am her friend. Not right now, you're not. If you were her friend, you'd be happy for her. Why should I be happy she's with him? Because, Emma said as if the answer were obvious. It means she's ready to start looking for the guy who's right for her, and everyone knows who that is. In the end, I honestly doubt if it'll be the guy over there. She smiled and touched his shoulder again. Do you really think we'd be giving you such a hard time if we didn't believe this was all going to work out for you two in the end? As much as she teased him, Mike knew at that moment why Henry loved her so much and why he loved her too. In a sisterly kind of way, of course. Julie and Richard's drinks finally arrived. Bourbon for him, a Diet Coke for her. And after paying, Richard put his wallet away, then... Diet Coke. Ugh. Richard put his wallet away, then glanced off to the side toward the man sitting at the end of the bar. The man was stirring his drink, seemingly minding his own business, but Richard waited. Sure enough, a moment later, the man's eyes drifted over to Julie. The whole time he and Julie waited for the drinks, the man had been doing that. Just that. Though he tried not to be obvious. This time, however, Richard caught his gaze and watched him with unblinking eyes, until the man finally turned away. Okay, that's just really weird. I know it was completely obvious who the crazy person's gonna be, but, like, what is wrong with him? Well, we'll find out eventually. Who are you looking at? Julie asked. Richard shook his head. No one, he said, just thinking about something else for a second there. He smiled. You up for hitting the dance floor yet? She asked. Not quite yet. I think I need to finish my drink first. Andrea, dressed in a tight black miniskirt, stiletto heels, and a halter top, had stretched the chewing gum from her mouth to her finger and was twirling it around in boredom as Cobra drowned a sixth shot of tequila and chased it with a squeeze of lemon. Wiping the pulp from his mouth with the back of his hand, he grinned at Andrea, his gold incisor catching the light of the neon sign behind them. Cobra had rolled up in front of the salon on his Harley on Thursday morning, though Andrea didn't know it. Her name was frequently mentioned at biker bars as far away as Louisiana, and by the time he'd left, Andrea had given him her phone number and spent the rest of the day strutting around the shop, feeling downright pleased with herself. In her rapture, she hadn't noticed the pitying glances Mabel had cast her, nor had she realized that Cobra was, like all the men she dated, basically a loser. He'd called her earlier that evening after a couple of beers and suggested that she meet him and his friends at the Clipper. Though not technically a date, he hadn't offered to pick her up, nor had it occurred to either of them that he might suggest getting something to eat first. Andrea had been thrilled by the time she hung up the phone, thinking it was close enough to at least feel like a date. She spent an hour figuring out what she wanted to wear. First impressions were important, before she left to find Cobra at the Clipper. The first thing he'd done was put his arms around her, resting both hands on her bottom while kissing her on the neck. Wow! It hadn't bothered her. After all, Cobra wasn't bad-looking, especially when compared to some of the other guys she'd gone out with. Though he wore a black t-shirt with a picture of a bloody skull emblazoned on the front and leather chaps over a crusty pair of jeans that is disgusting, he wasn't fat or hairy. And the tattoo of the mermaid on his arm, she had to admit, was relatively tasteful when compared to the others she'd seen. She wasn't too keen on the gold tooth thing, but he looked and smelled clean enough, which she couldn't always bargain on, despite the fact that he was wearing gross, crusty jeans. Nevertheless, she'd finally come to the realization that the evening had been a complete waste, and that she'd made a mistake by giving him her phone number. I have to sneeze. For one thing, after the first couple of shots, when things were just beginning to get interesting, a few of his friends had shown up, and one of them had informed her that Cobra wasn't the guy's real name. I already saw his name. Just the one he used with friends. His real name was Ed DeBoner. Oh, no. My name is Cobra, but my real name's Ed DeBoner. I mean, maybe that's not how you're supposed to say it, but that's how I'm saying it. That was when Oh, no. Okay. That was when the interest began to fade. For the life of her, she couldn't imagine having to admit that to anyone. Unlike Cobra, or Snake, or Rat, or even Dean, Ed wasn't the name of someone who drove a Harley. Okay, so that's what she's gonna focus on, okay. Ed wasn't the name of someone who drove a Harley, someone one step ahead of the law and living the free life. I mean, it could be if you tried to make it. Ed wasn't even the name of a real man. Ed was the name of a talking horse, for God's sake. And let's not even mention the last name. Okay, you can rag on it, but it's still a name. DeBoner. When he'd said it, she nearly spat her drink out. You want to go back to your place, baby? Cobra asked, slurring the words. I mean, this is probably why he calls himself Cobra and does not mention his real name. Cobra asked, slurring the words. Andrea slid the gum back into her mouth. No. Then let's get another drink. You don't have any money. So buy me a drink and I'll make it up to you later, baby. Though she'd liked being called baby earlier in the evening, thinking it made her seem sultry, that was when Cobra... Wait, what? Though she liked being called baby earlier in the evening, thinking it made her sultry, that was when Cobra was doing it. Not some guy that was when Cobra was doing it. Not some guy named Ed DeBoner. Andrea snapped her gum. Cobra seemed oblivious to her scorn. He reached under the table and ran his hand over her thigh, and she stood up, pushing away from the table, needing another drink. It was when she neared the bar that she recognized Richard. Oh my god, all the drama's gonna happen in this bar. You have Mike being all sullen and sad and jealous. You have Julie who's just like, yeah, okay, I'm in the dating scene now, alright, let's do this shit. Richard who's all like, that man has been looking at Julie, You have Andrea who's like, supposed to be the token hoe character. And then you have Cobra, aka Ed DeBoner. Stuff is gonna go down. At least, if nothing does, it's kind of gonna be a disappointment. Julie's face lit up as soon as she saw Mike. I keep doing it. Every time I see the comma, I don't do it right. Julie's face lit up as soon as she saw Mike, Henry, and Emma at a table near the dance floor. She reached for I almost said Henry's hand, and that would have been very confusing. She reached for Richard's hand. Her hand just reaches all the way across from the dance floor. She reached for Richard's hand. Come on, she said. I think I see some place we can sit, not someone. Sorry, Mike, I'm gonna have to sit on you now. There's no more chairs. They pushed their way through the crowd, crossed the edge of the dance floor, and reached the table. Hey guys, I didn't expect to see you here, Julie said. How are you? We're doing well, Henry said. We just thought we'd come by after dinner to see what was going on. Richard was standing behind her, and Julie tugged on his hand. I want you to meet someone. Richard, this is Henry and Emma, and this is my best friend Mike. Henry held out his hand. Hey there, he said. Richard hesitated before grasping it. Hello, he said simply. Mike and Emma came next. While Julie glanced at Mike, he smiled pleasantly, though doing so practically killed him. In the warm air of the bar, her face was slightly flushed. She was, he thought, particularly beautiful tonight. Do you want to sit down, Henry offered? We've got a couple of extra chairs. No, we don't want to bother you, Richard said. It's no bother. Come on, join us, Emma chimed in. You sure you don't mind, Julie asked. Don't be silly, Emma said. We're all friends here. It's not like we're gonna say, no, you're not allowed to sit with us because you didn't eat dinner with us. Ditched us for your date. Some friend you are. Julie smiled and moved around the table to take her seat. Richard followed and did the same. Once they were comfortable, Emma leaned across the table. So, Richard, she said, tell us about yourself. The conversation was stilted, almost uncomfortable at first, because Richard didn't volunteer much more than was asked directly. Occasionally, Julie supplied additional information for him. Other times she elbowed him playfully as if chiding him until he went on. As he spoke, Mike did his best to appear interested. And he was, at least in a self-interested way, if only to see what he was up against. But as the minutes rolled on, he began to feel as if his future were that of a salmon swimming upstream. Even he could see why Julie was interested in Richard. He was intelligent, and yes, good-looking, he conceded, but only if one liked rugged, athletic types. And unlike Mike, he was both college-educated and well-traveled, though he didn't laugh or joke much or appreciate Emma or Henry when they did. It seemed that his discomfort stemmed more from shyness than arrogance, and the way he felt about Julie was obvious. Whenever she spoke, Richard's eyes never left her face. He acted like a husband waking up on the first morning of his honeymoon. Through it all, Mike kept smiling and nodding, hating Richard's guts. A little later on, as Emma and Julie caught up on some of the latest news around town, Richard finished his drink. After asking if Julie wanted anything else, he excused himself to head back to the bar. When Henry asked him if he wouldn't mind grabbing another couple of beers, Mike stood as well, volunteering to go with Richard. I'll help you carry them back. They reached the bar, and the bartender signaled that he'd be there as soon as he could. Richard reached for his wallet, and though Mike was right beside him, he stayed silent. She's a great lady, Mike finally offered. Richard turned and seemed to study him before turning away again. Yes, she is, he said simply. Neither of them said another word to each other. Once they were back at the table, Richard asked Julie if she'd like to dance, and after saying goodbye, they were gone. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? Emma asked. Mike shrugged, not wanting to answer. And he seemed nice enough, Henry added, kind of quiet but polite. Mike reached for his beer. I didn't like him, he said. Oh, now that's a surprise, Henry said, laughing. I'm not sure I trust him. Henry kept smirking. Well, since you missed your opportunity, I guess we'll have to hang around for a while. What opportunity? You said tonight was the night you were going to ask her out. Shut up, Henry. That'd be kind of awkward, though, to ask her out when she's with somebody else. I feel like he should probably wait till later. Though, considering how things are right now, she's kind of like more very than kind of. She's very infatuated with Richard right now. So I don't think Mike confessing would do very much at the moment. It might make things a little awkward, but I mean, at the very least, he puts himself out there. So just don't do it when Richard is there. A little while later, Mike sat drumming his fingers on the table. Henry and Emma had gone to say hello to another couple they knew, and now that he was alone, Mike tried to figure out what it was exactly that he didn't like about Richard Franklin. Besides the obvious. No, there was more to it than that. No matter what Henry had said or what Julie seemed to think, Richard didn't strike Mike as a particularly nice guy. What happened at the bar made that plain. Once he'd said what he had about Julie, Richard had looked at him as if already recognizing Mike's feelings for her. And his face clearly expressed what he thought about that. You lose, so stay away. Not exactly the hallmark of a nice guy. So why didn't Julie seem to see the side of Richard that he did? Because the side that she's seeing is just the side of Richard being like, hey, I'm a good guy. Oh yeah, earlier, in either a chapter or two back, Richard just suddenly kissed her. And then she kind of had this, Julie was all like, I feel like he crossed the barrier. Like, I don't actually feel, like, I'm okay with it, I guess, considering that he's, like, an okay guy, and that's what she thinks. But, like, she felt this, like, there was, like, a boundary that got crossed, and then there was a part where Richard also was thinking about that, but Richard's kind of weird, and there's something going on with him already. So why didn't Julie seem to see the side of Richard that he did, and why hadn't Henry or Emma, or was the whole thing just a figment of his imagination? Mike ran through the scenario again. No, he finally decided he didn't imagine it. I know what I saw, and I don't like him. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as he scanned the room. His eyes found Richard and Julie, and he watched them for a moment before he forced himself to turn away. Oh, I thought they left. During the band's break, Julie and Richard had left the dance floor and found a smaller table on the far side of the bar, and Mike had been glancing their way ever since. He couldn't help it. Though he tried to pretend that he was still trying to figure Richard out, he knew his compulsion to watch had more in common with what people feel when they come across the scene of a grisly accident. Or even more accurately, he thought, watching them together was like watching a car plunging off a monstrous cliff with a bird's eye view through the windshield. That's how it seemed anyway. As the night wore on, he couldn't escape the conclusion that his chance with Julie suddenly going the way of Atlantis. While Mike was sitting by himself, Julie and Richard were staring into each other's eyes with goofy grins on their faces. They were leaning in to whisper and laugh, obviously enjoying each other's company. Disgusting. At least the last time he looked just a few seconds ago. Mike is so jealous. He's such a sad boy right now. But what, he wondered, were they doing now? Slowly, ever so subtly, Mike's eyes began to travel their way again. Julie was facing the other direction, so thankfully she wouldn't see him watching. If she caught him staring, she might wave at him or nod and smile, or worse, ignore him. The first two would have made him feel like an idiot. The last one would break his heart. As he turned, he saw Julie rummaging through her purse for something, her eyes focused in her lap. Richard's eyes, though, locked on his in a cool, almost confident appraisal. Yes, Mike, I know you're staring. Richard, it's like, okay, if the description had not said that something was gonna go down later on, then it's still, Richard still brings to the table something that's kind of, he knows, or like his first thought wasn't, hey, we're gonna have some fun in the bar. It was, this bar is filled with people who think that if you're here, you can all just get together, it doesn't matter. And then he got very, like, defensive, I guess, when there was a dude who was, like, some unnamed dude looking at Julie. And now it's, like, Mike that he has to deal with. And, I can understand why Mike doesn't like him. Mike froze. A kid caught pulling a 20 from his mother's wallet. He wanted to turn away, but couldn't seem to summon the energy to move until he heard a voice behind him. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Drew, the lead singer from the band, standing near the table. "Hey, Mike," Drew said. "Got a minute? I wanted to talk to you about something." An hour later, with Cobra completely inebriated, Andrea headed to the bathroom, as she'd done since she'd first spotted Richard earlier. She scanned the room, looking for him as she stood in line. He and Julie were walking off the dance floor. Richard leaned over to whisper something in her ear, then headed towards the men's room. Knowing he'd passed right by her, Andrea quickly ran her hand through her hair and adjusted her skirt and halter. She stepped out of line, heading him off. That's, I don't know, that feels like a weird way to word things. "Hey, Richard," she said brightly. "How are you?" "Fine, thanks," he said, though it took a moment. She saw the recognition in his face. "Andrea, right?" She smiled, thinking, I knew he'd remember. "I haven't seen you here before," she said. "It's my first time here. Don't you think it's great?" "Not really." "Oh, well, neither do I." "But there's not that many other places to go around here. Small town life, you know." "I'm learning," he said. "Friday nights are usually better, though." "Oh?" "Yeah, that's when I usually come. In fact, I'm almost always here then." He paused, looking directly at her and holding her gaze before finally nodding in Julie's direction. Listen, I'd love to stay and talk, but I really can't, because you're with Julie." He shrugged. "She is my date." "Yeah, I know," Andrea said. "Well, listen, it was nice seeing you again," he said. "Thanks, you too." A moment later, he pushed on the door, letting it close behind him. While Andrea was staring at the door, Cobra staggered up behind her, mumbling something crude about bodily functions. As soon as he followed Richard through the door, she decided it was time to leave. Seeing Cobra one more time, she thought, would ruin the feeling she had when her eyes met Richard's. Just past midnight, with the world glowing silver, Julie stood with Richard on the porch. Frogs and crickets were singing, a light breeze was moving the leaves, and even singers seemed to be more accepting of Richard, though his face was poking through the curtains, and he was eyeing them carefully. He hadn't made a sound. I don't think Singer so much accepts him, more so that barking is probably going to get him more in trouble, and he might as well just, I'll stop for now, but I'm watching you, and if you do anything, I will tear your throat out. "Thanks for tonight," she said. "You're welcome. I had a wonderful time." "Even at the Clipper?" "As long as you had fun, then I'm glad we went. Not your kind of place, huh?" He shrugged. "To be honest, I probably would have preferred something a bit more private, so you and I could be alone." "We were alone. Not the whole time." She looked at him, a quizzical expression on her face. "Are you talking about when we sat with my friends for a while?" she asked. "Did you think I did that because I wasn't having fun?" "I wasn't sure what to think. Sometimes women use that as a kind of escape when the date isn't going well, as in, help, I need rescuing." She smiled. "Well, She smiled. "Oh, that wasn't it at all. They were the ones I was supposed to go to dinner with tonight, and when I saw them, I wanted to say hi." Richard's eyes drifted to the porch light, then back to Julie. "Hey. Listen, I know I was kind of quiet with your friends. I'm sorry about that. I never seemed to know what to say." "You were fine. I'm sure they liked you. I'm not too sure that Mike did." "Mike? He was watching us." Though she hadn't noticed, she realized she should have expected something like that. "Mike and I have known each other for years," she said. "He watches out for me, that's all." Richard seemed to evaluate that. Finally, a small smile flickered across his face. "Okay," he said. For a long moment, neither of them said anything else. Then Richard moved toward her. This time, though, she expected the kiss, and though she wanted him to do it, or at least thought she wanted him to do it, she couldn't deny the slight feeling of relief when he turned to leave a minute later. No need to rush into anything, she thought. If it's right, I'll know. Alrighty then. This is the second time she's had this weird feeling about Richard. This is the second time they've kissed. The second time she's felt that something doesn't feel quite right. And, I mean, 2 times is kind of a lot for somebody, but, like, I'm also trying to take into consideration this is her first, not her first time, but, I guess, I don't know. This is like her first time finding somebody she actually likes enough after getting into the dating scene, but it's kinda, I mean, the first one was Richard got too excited and he kissed her, which is weird, and it's like, that doesn't really bode well if you can't control yourself, especially considering you don't know each other. That you don't know each other that well. And haven't for that long. You went on, like, what, 1 date, I think it was? It was, like, think 1. I don't quite remember. But it's still a rather concerning thing to think about, considering, and we're probably just at the very tip of the iceberg, since we're only on chapter 7, where we just got to chapter 7, and we still have quite a ways to go before anything hits the fan. Hopefully, we get more scenes with Singer in it, because that's the only reason why I picked up this book. I want more dog. I want to know what is with this dog. Anyway, even though we jumped from chapter 1 to chapter 6, I hope that you enjoyed this chapter, at the very least, and then hopefully later, if I read some pages, I'll go. I probably maybe jump to chapter 9 is next, maybe. It really depends how I feel. It's either chapter 9 or earlier. I really doubt it's gonna be later. So it's between 7 to 9, and who knows what will happen. See you guys in the next chapter, maybe, I guess. Bye-bye.